let me make sure I understand. So you're saying you had $85 million of cash on hand
That's correct.
and you borrowed an additional 100.
Correct.
What are you getting paid on your cash on hand?
Whatever the market interest rate is. So not about, I won't say they're 1-to-1, but not a whole lot different than what we're paying on the interest rate on the debt that we borrowed.
So you're having your cash managed and getting a 2.86% return on it?
No, sir. I'm not sure what the interest rate is today. As I said, it would be what the market is. It wouldn't be a 1-for-1, but it is not as though we are getting no interest on
Right, but
cash.
let's presume that it's what I see in other places, half a point.
Okay.
So on $85 million, you're getting paid half a point. On $100 million, if those slides are correct, you're paying 2.86%.
That's the true interest cost. Yes, sir.
Now, I am not a finance major, but that seems like negative arbitrage to me.
So to be clear, and that's a fantastic question. No surprise that you asked Chairman Finlay. But the point of the matter is that Santee Cooper was going to be borrowing debt for capital. We were going to be at some point. That's not the question.
If you have $85 million in cash on which you're getting paid very little, why would you borrow $100 million, even though the rate is fairly de minimis? You're losing $2 million a year, give or take. Help me understand how that is a savvy financial transaction.
Certainly, and let me finish my response here. So to compare the 85 to 100 million assumes that if you had used that 85, you would never have had to borrow the 100 million. What I was saying and what I'm saying to you is that that is not an accurate representation of the facts. What I'm saying to you is that $100 million was going to be borrowed. So we can borrow that $100 million at an all-in true interest cost of 2.86% known today, and that's fixed. That's not moving. Or we can wait until 2021, 2022, 2023, when that interest cost might be 5%. It's unknown, and it could be higher. So really what we're trading in here is certainty.
So let's unpack that assumption. But first, I do want to point out that you set up the analogy by saying that the $100 million, when the $85 million was paid off, would bring you back to basically zero.
That's correct.
So I'm simply unpacking your analogy, which is that the cash would offset the debt. But let's unpack that a little bit. Let's say 3 years from now, the rate is on that $100 million, 5%. The cash that you've foregone in that 3-year period is almost higher than a 5% rate 3 years from now.
I'm going to need you to unpack that for me. I'm sorry.
Sure. 3 years where you pay 2.86 on $100 million is $2.86 million of interest you paid.
That's right.
There is some, obviously, that you were getting paid in interest on the $85 million, and there's a slight difference of $15 million. So let's assume that the total cost is $2.5 million. 3 years from now, at 5%, if rates go up, that's the cost. In other words, if you borrow $100 million 5 years from now, you pay 2.5% more than you would have, but you're in no different position. I mean, that's just the net cost of the money.
Well, I think your conclusion is the conclusion. You're in. So I'm saying we're in the same place, and so therefore
that's totally a rate bet. My point to you is, if rates stay low, you've paid $2 million for no gain.
And so I'll refer you to my concluding statement, which is what we are trading in here is certainty.
Right, but how do you decide to spend $2 million for certainty? Some might say it's convenience.
I'm not entirely sure I see the convenience in that, but at the end of the day, what I will say is how do you trade $2 million for certainty is that you have folks who come in and who look at the interest rates with you, what the projections for the interest rates are, what the uncertainties of the future are, and you make a decision.
And I guess this is my point. A certain savings today is worth a whole lot more than a potential savings down the road or a potential cost. None of us thought rates would be here. So I would ask you to look back at those people and their predictions on rates. And my bet is they've been consistently wrong on where rates would be. So what I want to make sure everybody understands is that Santee Cooper has spent $2 million, not on certainty, but on insurance, because rates could be exactly the same 3 years from now. So $6 million of ratepayer money has been spent to avoid potentially paying higher rates in the future.
So one thing I do want to make sure that I'm clear about here is that zero out happens in 2023.
Well, I was
Right.
using 3 years.
2023. No, I'm not questioning your math on that. It's 2023, and you might recall that Santee Cooper's in a rate lock through 2024. So Santee Cooper is, by means of savings and by other means, footing the. But we're not passing that along, and in fact could not pass that along to ratepayers. And I appreciate your point, but I did want to make that point.
I will simply say this. Other state agencies are not allowed to spend $2 million to avoid a potential problem without a little bit more oversight than this. It makes me very uncomfortable because I think if you have $85 million of cash that you plan to pay down debt with anyway, why you would not immediately offset the debt, save the money, and avoid the whole issue that we're sitting about, which is, as Representative Cobb Hunter pointed out, many people felt sideswiped by the debt issuance. I will say this personally, and then I'm going to be quiet. If this had simply been a rate refinance for exactly the same amount of money, no one would have said a word, because everyone would have said it's great to pay less interest. It's the additional $100 million that's made everybody very uncomfortable. And it makes me ever more uncomfortable to know that you had $85 million in cash sitting there and that you've entered into a long-term negative arbitrage on your cash versus your bonds. Thank you.